Marcin Zabłocki, MLOps architect at GetInData. Recently, we've released a lot of materials related to MLOps, such as blog posts, video tutorials, webinars, and ebooks. You can find all of them linked down below this video, and we've been getting a ton of questions related to MLOps, so we've decided to record this special Q&A episode and answer all of them. So let's get started. First question: is Kedro open source? Yes. And the long answer is yes, it is open source framework, which was released by Quantum Block, which is AI company by McKinsey. And you can find a great community in Kedro, so you can find their Slack, their GitHub. We are, as GetInData, also really active there, so it is a great community and I encourage you to join. Is every node in Vertex AI Pipeline executed on a different machine? It is very difficult to answer this question clearly, because Vertex AI Pipeline is managed solution, so actually you don't care about provisioning of your virtual machines or Kubernetes clusters that are running your code underneath the hood. So on the one hand, you can treat your pipeline as if the nodes were executing on a totally different machine. You should remember about serialization of your data between the consecutive nodes, but at the same time, you don't know what will happen underneath the hood if Google optimizes their infrastructure in a way that multiple nodes will reuse the same virtual machine. I would suspect that it will be executed in this way, but there are no evidence in the documentation related to that. How to test a pipeline? I guess this question is related to Kedro pipelines, so you have a few options there. The first option is, since Kedro nodes are pure Python functions, you can just unit test them in any framework of your choice. At the same time, I highly recommend you to utilize Kedro environments and prepare some small environments with catalog pointing to small subsets of datasets that you could use in CI/CD during, for example, Docker build, and try to run your pipeline in this particular environment to assert your logical correctness of the pipeline. And you will at least know whether your pipeline is running end-to-end or not. Let's imagine the following scenario. You have the following directed acyclic graph, and the question is, will B and D run in parallel? So that depends on the kind of a runner that you will use with Kedro. So in general, in the default runner, which is a sequential runner, no, the nodes will not execute in parallel. However, there are many options there. First one, the Kedro parallel runner, which is using Python multiprocessing. When you use this runner, your nodes will most likely execute in parallel, provided that you have at least 2 or more workers. Another option is when you use one of our plugins, for example, Kedro Azure ML or Kedro Kubeflow or Kedro Vertex AI, then the execution is passed from Kedro to external executors, such as the one that I've mentioned. And then those executors usually allow to parallelize parts of the pipeline. So if you have some kind of a branch out in your Kedro pipeline, then those cloud runners will most likely run the nodes in parallel. Can I use Kedro pipelines in a stream-like fashion? As soon as first record, shards, etc. of A is created, we run the B node. No, Kedro is not designed to work in a streamlined fashion. You could provide some workarounds or try to run the Kedro nodes every time some event happens in your custom code, but it is not a scenario that is supported out of the box. How expensive is to run pipelines in Vertex AI pipelines compared to running them in Airflow, for example in GCP Composer? It is a great question, because more and more companies are looking at cutting their cloud costs and trying to implement FinOps to understand their cloud costs better. So the comparison between Vertex AI pipelines and Airflow boils down to the place when you are running the Airflow cluster. It can be standard cluster where you have full influence on the nodes that are running in the Kubernetes cluster, or it can be GKE autopilot cluster where you only specify the resource requirements that you need to execute your pods. So with GCP Composer, regardless of the type of Kubernetes cluster that you are using, whether it's standard one or autopilot, there's no scale to zero, because some pods of Airflow that Google provides are running all of the time, so you will see recurring cost every month. And additionally, you will pay for the pods that you will use to run your actual ML pipelines. On the other hand, with Vertex AI Pipelines, which is a fully managed solution, you only specify resources that you need to run your pipeline, and GCP Cloud does all of the heavy lifting for you. You don't care about clusters, you don't care about provisioning. Everything is serverless and you only pay for what you use, which means only when your pipeline is running. Additionally, you might consider Vertex AI pipelines when you are running GPU jobs. So for example, if you are training neural network which requires some GPUs, it would be much easier to run it in Vertex AI pipelines. I guess it would be possible to run it also in Kubernetes cluster in GCP Composer, but you will need to do some engineering there. Is there a way to convert a Kedro pipeline to Apache Beam? So as an engineer, I would say there is always a way, but Kedro and Apache Beam are frameworks designed to address totally different set of problems. So in Kedro, you orchestrate your pipelines, which are usually machine learning pipelines. So you have data processing as well as model training and model evaluation there, while Apache Beam is mostly used for purely data pipelines. So if you have a lot of data to be processed in a distributed manner, such as preprocessing a lot of data for later use with machine learning pipelines, then sure, Apache Beam would be something that you could use. Both frameworks have some notion of directed cyclic graphs because Kedro pipelines are DAGs and Apache Beam pipelines are also DAGs. The way that data is processed in both of those frameworks is slightly different. Between every Kedro node, data passing happens in the form of data that is defined in data catalog, while in Apache Beam you have this P collection abstraction which does not materialize if it does not have to. So Apache Beam in general does a lot of optimization to make the pipeline execute as fast as possible, while Kedro pipelines are fully imperative and they will always execute in a way that they are defined in your code. Moreover, I would say that you can easily plug in Apache Beam pipeline within Kedro nodes. So if you have a lot of data to be processed within a single logical Kedro node, for example, before your model training happens, you can easily use Apache Beam framework there and just offload the data processing job to for example, data flow in GCP. So it would work in a way that you would start Apache Beam job from Kedro node. The job would probably save some data in, for example, GCS, and then Kedro will load this data once the pipeline finishes. How to load datasets that are larger than memory in Kedro? It is a great question related to scalability of Kedro pipelines, and you have a few options there. The first option would be using partition dataset. So partition dataset are a way for Kedro to load data that is stored on a disk in a specific manner. So you can imagine that you have a folder, and underneath the folder there are many, for example, CSV or Parquet files. So with partition dataset, you will be able to load each file separately and process it without loading a huge dataset into memory. Another option would be utilizing the same dataset that you used before. For example, if you are using pandas, you can use CSV dataset, but you can use also the load args argument, where you can pass chunk size, and that means instead of getting full pandas data frame as an input to your node, you will get iterator of pandas data frames, and you can iterate without loading the whole dataset into memory at once. And lastly, if you have really huge dataset, like I answered in the previous question, you could use Apache Beam or some other tool like PySpark or other managed solution that is designated to process huge amounts of data, and just call it from the Kedro node and wait for the job to complete, and then proceed with your Kedro pipeline normally. How to load daily datasets in a format that Kedro does not support out of the box. So I guess the author of this question by Kedro does not support out of the box meant the way that Kedro handles versioned dataset. So indeed, versioned dataset in Kedro have this specific datetime format that is used to save and load your datasets from disk in a versioned manner. However, if you use partition datasets, it can be any format you would like, because you will get a handle to every file that you have, for example, in your folder with your data. So in this example, there was a question related to weather data, daily weather data. So in partition dataset, you will have access to all of the files and you will be able to load them. And obviously, you can also write your own custom datasets if you want to handle some particular date format of your choice. How to integrate Kedro with experiment tracking solutions such as MLflow, weights and biases, and Neptune.ai. So Kedro handles integration with experiment tracking solutions pretty well. You have community maintained Kedro MLflow plugin, you have official Kedro Neptune.ai plugin, and for weights and biases, since Kedro is purely Python framework, you will be able to integrate with it easily. However, there is no dedicated plugin for that. Can I run Kedro on any cloud provider? Yes. And I encourage you to check out our blog post where I show how you can run Kedro in any cloud provider. The blog post is called Running Kedro Everywhere. There I explain how you can run your Kedro pipelines on clouds such as GCP with Kedro Vertex AI plugin, on Azure with Kedro Azure ML plugin, and also on Kubernetes cluster either with Airflow or with Kubeflow. So we have Kedro Airflow Kubernetes plugin for that and Kedro Kubeflow plugin for that. And the place where you run your Kubernetes cluster does not matter for us. So if you're running hybrid cloud, fully cloud, or serverless cloud solution for Kubernetes, you can just run your Kedro pipelines with our plugins there. So that covers all of the questions that you've asked after Michał's webinar. And once again, I encourage you to check out all of the MLOps materials we've prepared so far, webinars, video tutorials, ebooks, and so on. They are linked down below this video. And if you have any more questions, feel free to ask us, and we will see you in the next video.